Welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. We're a father-son business podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. And you know what? At what point do they become a semi-co-host when our guests are on multiple times? I'm just thinking, we've had James on a couple of times. James Corbett, folks, if you didn't pick it up. James is joining us again, but I'm excited because he's got a lot of projects going on, to include some things that we were talking about earlier on the business side, but really, and I know this is where he'll want to focus. We're going to focus on Project Refit and some of the stuff you got going on. One of the things that always pops into my mind with something like Project Refit is, where do the event ideas come from? And what I mean is, so there's and I'm going to stop rambling here in a minute. There's the event idea that you do with the veterans and first responders, but the other events that are like the one coming up in the fall with the tattoos, where do these ideas come from?
Oh man, I think that's less of a question of Project Refit and more of a question of research, understanding, listening. I think the other aspects of business that are super important and gets into the DNA of the individual or the individual entrepreneur, if you will. To be honest with you, I'm very creative. I'm also very observant. Those are some of my key qualities as an individual. I'm not talking about observant where I'll walk into a room and notice my girlfriend's hair was cut, right? I'm not that observant, right? I'm not that type of observant because I'm so hyper focused on business and the people I'm working with in my market. There's actually a complete difference there, right? So when I'm to go with the example of the tattoo convention, I really wanted to come up with something that was incredibly engaging, something that is going to draw veterans, draw first responders, draw their families out for something that's different, right? Now, there are other tattoo conventions that have happened around the nation. Some even that say like, hey, veterans, come on out. But I think where we went the next level was when I was like, hey, listen, and how I got to this point was, hey, listen, I need to do something that's really important for this community. What is something that's healthy, that doesn't involve alcohol or drugs or sex or any of those things that are necessarily, a negative to the mental health or health of an individual, or even not family friendly, and bring something that might be actually that's family friendly, could actually bring people out to and host it different and have it be about the stories and about the guys that they served with, the men and women that they fought with or served alongside of and did their job alongside of. And you know what? It came down to, it's all over them all the time. It's the tattoos, right? So I just did one quick piece of research. I was like, all right, what's the percentage of veterans that have tattoos? Oh my God, it's like 92+% of veterans have tattoos, right? It's insane. It's almost 100% of the combat roles have tattoos. So now why is that? Because they're telling stories. They're like Dan Lombard, for instance, every tattoo that he has a story. What's a super important part of the healing process for a veteran when they're coming out? It's actually sharing their stories, right? It's actually about getting to the crux of their problems and the issues that they may have. It's understanding themselves and the stories that come with it. So I was like, there it is. Tattoos, stories, and healing all coming together, right? So that's why it's even called Project Refit's Tattoo Convention, Stories of Blood and Ink. So that is the name of the actual tattoo convention itself. And that is all of it combined as how we came up with it. It's really through observation, understanding the people, and just understanding what they want.
Interesting thing that's happened with tattoos, where they're more culturally. Remember, they used to be, the biker gang, the gang things.
Yeah, back in my day.
And even when I was,
that was fantastic.
Oh, I didn't hear it.
Oh, I said back in
He
my
said
day.
back in my day.
Sound a little old man.
Where I'm going to back in my day, because really what I'm talking about is we used to do these forms before we went on an op, and I can't remember, it was something prep. It was a prep form, but basically it was our how do we get recognized if we get captured, POW, all these sort of things. But we were also taught about the identification of tattoos and how tattoos set us apart for other operations, and we shouldn't have them. And the irony of this is I go down to the unit now, and dude's got full sleeves and everything right up to the collar, and it's just an interesting aspect when I think back of what it was like, right in at the Cold War and into the Cold War, and where the guys are now with tattoos, how different it is. So I just had to throw that out.
It is
It's a
fantastic.
cultural change.
Yeah, it's a complete change.
How do you, I guess, looking forward, because you talked a little bit about your process, and I think you also you got the trifecta there with the tattoo convention. How do you plan to systemize that moving forward? Because I think that's a really tricky thing, is you find the genius, and then it's like, okay, cool, now I can just do this every time, instead of you got to have the system in order to replicate this, with future events. What's your thought process on that?
So I don't think it's actually as difficult as you would think, especially with the veteran community specifically. Um, so for enlisted men and women, very much that is the of course officers need help too and support too, right? But I think if you look at statistics and you look at the numbers, you'll notice a lot of the time most of the individuals that struggle are the enlisted, correct? So, and if I'm wrong, somebody yell at me about that. I could have misread the statistics, whatever. But here's what I'm going to say. No matter if you're enlisted or an officer, there is something that's really similar between all of you, and that's tattoos. Everybody's got them. I think that they all love their time in service. Most of them love their time in service. They love to tell the stories about the memories they have. I think that, and by the way, that's a human trait, right? Humans love storytelling. I like to tell stories, right? So I think storytelling is something that you can combine into it. I think history, just like Otis was just sharing with us, right? Some of the history about things, the things that he noticed that change, and kind of mechanical in thinking. I think a lot of veterans are very mechanical in the way that they think. And I noticed that they have an affinity towards vehicles, guns, tattoos, and sporting events, right? Things that they can challenge themselves physically with, right? And those are kind of like the I would say the strings that bring people together, right? So I think a lot of events focused in those realms, getting outdoors and camping, and what it was like in the field, and to relive that a little bit, doing things that are around those type of factors is actually what we're doing here at Project Refit, right? Which is why we're so damn effective at reaching out to people.
I think there's also the other side of it when you're talking about coming up with events, creating ideas and those type of things, which is then it's like, okay, you can come up with all these ideas, and it's also then choosing which ones you want to implement. Because with Project Refit also, it's a very, it's a particular circumstance that for a lot of businesses, it's like, we got to focus on this, get moving on that. And it's like, we can, we don't want the good idea fairy around. But then also when you're talking events, it's like, if you put out an event and one guy comes out and he has a great time, then it's a successful event. So how do you balance that of, it's like, you don't want to just do something every single day, but also, it's about that one guy making that impact on just one person with an event. How do you balance those two so you're not spread too thin?
I'm going to sound like a bad person right now, but that's okay. I disagree with you.
Okay.
I think that I don't think it's good enough to reach one person. I don't. I started this thing out saying like, oh, if I reach one guy, I'm going to help one guy. And then I recognized the dude that I founded the organization with was my guy. Well, there's literally thousands of others that we need to help out, right? So And if everybody goes into their nonprofit with the idea of like, oh, we reach one person, you're not running a good business. And a nonprofit's a business. And my business is getting out there and helping these individuals and getting more of them to interact with the community around them. That's my business. That's the business I'm in. And I'm relentless in that pursuit, right? So if I'm genuinely relentless in that pursuit and trying to fight this real war that's happening here on the soil at home, then I better get real serious about attracting more numbers. So I think it's actually bad business that most of these nonprofits think that way. Most nonprofits are like afraid of money for some reason. Most nonprofits are afraid of spending money. Most nonprofits are afraid of making money, of saying like, oh, we have paid employees. You better have paid employees if you want to succeed and survive, and you want to make an impact and a difference. Everybody's so afraid of the way other people are thinking about them, something that I struggled with a little bit with Refit for a few months last year. And I got over, I would say like 3 months ago, kind of killed my ego off. I was like, I'm actually what am I, so vain that I care what people think about me? Man, fuck that. I know what I'm here for. I know what I'm trying to do. I kind of reminded myself of the mission and the fight, and it's not about me. And I don't give a shit what people think about me, right? Like, it's not about me. It's literally about the guy that I go and help every single day. And I tell people, I want to hire people. I want to hire veterans. I want to make a shit ton of money with this organization. Not me personally. I personally want to have money coming in from impact and like buy myself a ranch one day. But like for Project Refit, I want other people to make good money. I want them to be able to be hired by us, support a family and absolutely love their job and get out there and kill it every single day, reaching more veterans and getting them involved with Project Refit. We're not just here to say we're doing something. We're here to actually do something. So
I like the pushback, but I want to kind of piece these two things together, because the reason that I think so many people, like you said, you started off with this too. This is what my approach to coaching rugby. A lot of the time, it's having that impact on one person, and when you focus on the impact on one person, you tend to have an impact bigger than that. And then I think the reason that so many people like that philosophy, and my personal reason behind it, is because when you start to think too big, then you can kind of lose touch with what you're trying to actually do. So then I guess I just want to know, how do you balance those two philosophies? Because I see the growth there. That makes sense. But also I'm worried you're stepping out, or not worried, but, stepping too far that way without thinking about the individuals type thing.
That's a spectacular question, actually, Camden. So there is an evolution in the process, right? So we did notice as we're building this thing out that, so we have something pretty special with the grassroots, with the reaching of one person, all that kind of stuff, right? And we were like, well, when we say I got some pushback, and I literally sat back in a little hole and just like thought. I was like, if I really want to make an impact with our organization and make an impact on the whole community overall, how can we actually do that? What can we lead with? What can we change about the community and the way it's being handled, the way the money is being handled, right? We need to focus in on that. Clearly, people are afraid of it, yet also need it. So what does that mean? All right, so that led me into this philosophical debate between the two. The question that you just asked me, actually, how do you go from that one person to the growth, is basically what I heard you say. Is that about right?
Yeah,
Camden?
exactly.
Before I continue. Okay. So what we're doing, this is kind of cool. So it actually led into the fire team methodology, right? So we're so a lot of nonprofits, when you do research, and I urge anyone to do this research, look at some of your favorite gigantic nonprofits that exist right now and look at how they're actually taking money from their local chapters, right? So it's actually from my own personal research that I did, talking to the people boots on ground, not going to the websites. I was like, how much money are they actually giving you as a chapter to work with in your local area? A lot of these nonprofits take 90% from the chapters and keep 10% with the local chapter. So I was like, oh shit, that explains a lot. Why people end up complaining, they get mad, they're all pissed off, like, they're not doing anything. Even a lot of these nonprofits, they might be doing good stuff in terms of raising awareness and whatever. Like, basically that's spending money for marketing is what raising awareness is, in my opinion. And just raising money by hosting events and like, so you're hosting events and you're raising awareness, what are you actually doing? How are you actually hosting conversations and empowering your people to make a difference, right? If everybody's model was working, there wouldn't be as many suicides as there are today. So what we're doing is we're challenging the narrative. We're saying, okay, we're going to keep it grassroots, and this is how we're going to do it. I thought about it from the money perspective, which goes right to your point, Camden. So I was like, okay, 70% is going to stay with the local fire team, which is a group of 5 to 6 people on a team affecting change locally in their community. 30% comes back to corporate, which pays for salaries, which pays for operations, which pays for the retreats for the veterans that we're going to be bringing out, at least partially, because then a part of that 70% that's being raised by that fire team, they're going to send guys that they bring in themselves on these retreats with us to do real healing, while they're also finding purpose with different missions that they have locally. So I'll give you an example. We have a fire team that was just founded, our first one, and they're actually affecting change locally by hosting fireside chats that we have on these retreats in South Jersey right now, every single month. And they're going to fund, this is where it gets really cool. So they become almost their own entity in New Jersey in general. They fund other fireside chats to pop up all around New Jersey and even in other states. So they can just pay for the materials and the supplies and things like that. So other people in other states can begin to start their own fireside chats. And then you're actually doing work together on these peer groups that you begin to start up, right? And they're doing it. They're funding it. Of course, we get the numbers and all that good shit, but they're the ones with 70% of the money to do it, which is really, honestly, spectacularly different.
Yeah. And and
it keeps it grassroots.
I was just to kind of put a bow on that, because what you're talking about is you're still having the individuals who are focusing on it's like, look, I just need to save this one guy, and like still having that mentality, because that's a good way to move forward and to look at it.
Yes.
But then at the same time, you're back there in the big picture, going, okay, here's what we're really doing. So that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. That's exactly right, Camden. It literally. So Dan said to me, he's like, dude, in your process of your like whatever brain you got going on there. Grassroots. That's all I can say. I just want it to be grassroots. And I was like, damn, that's actually a really good point, because it goes to what you just said. And you reiterated of that one person. How am I going to help that one person? Right. And that's how you do it. You give them the money to do it, right? You don't take away from the people that are in the community making the change. I'll give you 2 examples of future fire teams that are happening right now. They're actually formulating their plans in their teams right now. We have one person who's going to be cleaning graveyards of fallen soldiers, right? And then you have another person who's going to be hosting car shows and car cruises to bring veterans out to the car shows and car cruises to hang out around vehicles and talk about themselves and hang out with each other, right? And create that peer group mentality. And then they'll meet more guys to send out to us. Then you have another person doing cleanups. Then you have another person hosting fireside chats, and it all begins to move as one good machine of peer support, which is everything that we're about. And by the way, one more thing about the fire team, and I promise I'll shut up. The last thing about the fire team is
wait.
The 5
that
to 6
defeats the purpose of the of the show if you shut up. So.
Oh yeah, you're right. We're gonna keep going for sure. But the 5 to 6 fire team members, they literally have to check in on each other once a month. They have to ask each other once a month, yo, what's going on? How are you doing? Do you need any help? Are you unhealthy? Are you healthy? Like, what's going on? How can I help you?
So what I'd love to talk through is almost what I'm struggling with it. Is it a workflow? Is there something else? But it's the tie-in with an event like the tattoo parlor.
Yeah.
That's my Freudian slip. The tattoo event in the fall. Is there a kind of a workflow from that to a retreat and or vice versa? So how, because I know it's also a fundraiser, but there's more to it than that. And what's the connectivity?
So the tattoo convention that's happening is very much, we want to raise a ton of money. That is like the major goal of that. The aside to that is we're going to bring out other nonprofits that we want to locally in the area that guys can get to know and meet and everything like that. We're also going to have a sign-up sheet for the retreats that we're hosting, so we're going to be recruiting for that. And we're also going to have on site, we're going to have a video camera, a video operator to be collecting stories of the different tattoos that are showing up and the memory of those individuals that it's either dedicated to or of the memories of the combat that they were in or whatever it may be. So it's building up the camaraderie piece even from that point. But it really is a fundraiser and talking about who we are and getting people to know who Project Refit is. That is like the main thing of the tattoo convention.
But there's more to it because of the way you described it in the storytelling and the opportunities. So that's what I'm throwing back at you, because maybe you haven't thought about it this way, but I'm hearing it this way. Is what is that there can be, and maybe there should be, a workflow.
Yeah.
For lack of a better way of putting it. Dude one shows up or just came back from the retreat, goes to the tattoo convention. Dude two shows up at the tattoo convention, ends up at a retreat. Kind of that's the workflow I'm hearing. There's connective tissue. Yes, the event, the original idea of the event was to raise money because, right, got to keep the lights on, got to be able to operate.
Definitely.
But there's more to it. And that's what I'm throwing back at you, because there's some things there which, and I can tell you from experience, will lead to corporate sponsorship of the event by being able to tell the story of that workflow of dude two showing up there, ending up at the retreat in 6 weeks.
That is very true. And you're correct. I did not think of it that way. You are very right that is a workflow that we should definitely include. It's interesting. And I know I can say this now. So you guys are going to hear something else for the first time. So it's kind of cool. I get to do that with you guys. But we actually just did and I made this announcement on social media and stuff like that, but I'll tell you who the company is. But we just did a training of a Fortune 50 company in active listening in the Project Refit way. And we developed a whole training around it. We sold it as a service. We're actually getting paid to do that now. And it's really cool to be able to do. We actually have like a service we're going to get paid for as a nonprofit, which is spectacular. Not a lot of nonprofits can say that. And it's going to be another way for us to generate income, to hire people. And you know what I mean? So anyway, we got hired by Comcast, right? And Comcast actually said to us, they were like, hey, we may even want to become a sponsor of that tattoo convention because that sounds spectacular. And you know what? You're right, Otis. I bet you it is the thought process of that workflow of how they're going to be even helping their veterans that work at their organization to do that. That is a really good point, genuinely. I didn't even think of it that way. And I appreciate you giving that nugget of knowledge here. That is crazy. Really, really appreciate that a lot. Thank you for that.
I want to just add on that, because I think it's, when we, from the entrepreneur perspective, business owner, you want to look at all the different moving pieces. It's a really important thing. And it's like when you do that, I'm looking over at one of these I drew on chalkboard, you get this complicated web of things. And it's important to understand the complicated web of things, that people are moving this direction, and all that. But it's also really important to have, okay, here's the primary path. Here's the story that we're really telling. So I think that's how you're going to get people to connect to it. Because it's like watching a nature documentary, right? There's a crazy food web going on, and it's amazing. There's lots of interesting stuff. But I want to hear about the tiger cub growing up with his mom and how he learned how to hunt, and this particular story. That's the one that people care about when they get to donate to the rainforest. It's not the full biology of everything, or the ecology, I guess, but it's like being able to tell that individual story. And I want to flip this back to then it's, how are you guys then going to take? Because I think there's an interesting, when you start telling stories. The first time we had you on, James, when it was just me and you, we talked about the importance of being willing as a civilian to ask about these stories and to listen and to go through that. But then I think we touched on this a little bit. Then it's also there's a privacy aspect to it. So how do you approach that with Project Refit, where it's like, look, I want to tell your story. Like that tattoo has a meaning of, combat deployment, it goes down all this way. And you want to tell that story. And you want to pass that on to Comcast and be like, look at this story. It's amazing. But then it's like, also that's a guy who might not want to share it that wide. How do you approach that?
Yep. I think we're pretty different. We usually don't, right? So, and I don't give a shit. Like I said before, I got rid of my ego a while ago and I had to remind myself of that again past couple of months. I don't care. I'm protecting the individual who's sharing this story with me and entrusting it with me, right? It's out of mind, right? So when I'm talking to people, I give very vague stories that I'm not going to let you know ever who it is. I'll give you a perfect example. We did a car show for a veteran, Marine veteran, to raise money for he and his family. The family came to the car show and people didn't even know. There was one point I was talking to somebody about the veteran and his family while his wife and kids were standing with me. And I was like, yeah, we're helping out this family locally, blah, blah, blah. And she's standing over, the wife is like, oh my, like, wait, he's really doing this thing. Like, right, he's really protecting us right now. Right. And she even said to me afterwards, she's like, you've been doing that with everybody, haven't you? And I was like, of course, I made a promise. I know how much privacy means, and I'm going to stand by you as long as you want to stand by us. That's it. Bottom line. So we even had, our one accountant, our treasurer was actually going to download some reports even from an application that we use to distribute money and funds. And I was like, I'm not giving you the money because it tells you exactly where they spent the money. I won't even give him access to where they spent their money because we gave it to them to spend. It is their money to spend. He doesn't even have access to that shit. I don't care unless it comes up in a legal dispute or something weird like that, which I don't ever expect it to be. No one's getting access to that. I don't care who you are, right? So we take the privacy of our individuals to the next level. I'm not going to. You can even go to our Instagram and see that I told a story about a success story, and I say the individual the entire time, right? The individual the entire time. You don't know who the individual is. You don't know. We just recently did have one of our vets actually said to us like a year ago. He's like, "Yo, man, anytime you need a story to be shared, let me know, and I'll share the story at an event for you guys if you want." He told us that we could do that. So I went back to him. I was like, "Hey, man, I know that you asked this before. Would you like to come out to the golf outing and give some words?" And he was like, "Absolutely, would love to do that for you." Great, let's do it, man. So went out. He came out. He gave a speech, to the best of his abilities, and then that was it. You know what I mean? It wasn't like a Nobel Prize winning speech or anything like that. It's a fucking U.S. Marine that went through a bunch of shit and is getting vulnerable in front of a bunch of people. So like he did his best, and that's all you can ask for. And I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? I told him after, I was like, "Bro, great job. You did phenomenal. You did your best, and that's all we care about." And then I gave the mic back over to me, and then that was that. So I hope that answers your question of how, on a multi-level, I tried answering it of how seriously we take the individual's privacy here at Project Refit. You do not have to worry about us ever sharing your story without your permission. Never.
How do you establish that trust when you go on a retreat? Because there's various methods, but how do you do that?
I'm pretty blunt, man. Like right from the rip. I think that my track record as an individual, as a leader of this organization, Dan's track record as a leader of this organization, and our now volunteers that come out to these retreats to engage in the fireside chat as well. So there are our Project Refit active listeners. Like we're all on the same page. We are aggressively open with everybody about the rules. We enforce the rules. We're not afraid to enforce any rule, actually, which I think also establishes trust. So I think it's our dedication to the discipline that we instill at the actual event itself is what promotes the trust.
That's a great piece and a great way to approach it because, a lot of guys, at least my experience, guys that are in that boat, have that issue that they should go to a retreat have a trust issue, and that's part of it, right? Otherwise,
Yeah, man.
I mean,
Oh,
my theory is that they would have figured it out already if they had if
yeah.
they were able to trust more. And that's, one of the things that we've learned, or I learned, is, in that close knit group, there's some, whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas sort of thing. And
Correct.
then having the ability to share those things outside of that very small group that had these similar experience as you. And one thing about these issues, PTS, is if there was 5 guys there that had the event happen to them, not all 5 are going to have PTS or have some reaction to it. Everybody's different. Yep. And that one person may be the one person that was affected by that event to where they have issues and problems. And that's a whole nother subject area of how now they have that trust in that unit, but now they're outside of that unit. So there's a, sorry for going down this rabbit hole, but there's a whole nother mental issue in this, because now they are completely isolated. And the first thing that you have to do in that isolation to help them get better is to establish that trust. So when I throw all that out there, could you just, you talk about it, give us a feeling for arrival in processing sort of thing for a retreat, of how that is established right from the get-go. Trust.
So I'll give you a story of a guy that came out that he wasn't going to come because of that exact reason, right? So he's an alcoholic, and we don't condone drinking. If you come out and you have an issue, you're aware of your drinking issue. We're not going to tell you not to get alcohol because, dude, you're going to die if you don't, kind of thing. So his friend who was coming on the retreat was like, look, dude, I'm going and I want you there. Right? So then he was like, I'll get one of the guys from Refit on the phone and we'll talk and we'll set some boundaries and guidelines. No problem. I want you there. So we got on the line with this guy, Dan did. And he, they were talking. They talked for like freaking hours, probably. Knowing Dan, it was probably like a 2-hour, 3-hour conversation, right? So lo and behold, the thing that got him out was, no matter what, if you show up 1 minute later, you're like, I want to get the fuck out of here, we'll buy you a ticket. We don't care. You'll be out. You're not a prisoner. You're not being held here against your will, and we will absolutely pay for you to get out. We don't want you to feel any sort of obligation to be here. If you don't want to do anything other than sit on that fucking ranch with yourself, by yourself the entire time, except at 8 p.m. you must be sitting by the fire. That's the only must that we have, the only requirement. Then you can, by all means. And he said, all right, fine, I'll come out. And then it ended up being, there was an incredible healing that he had when he was at the retreat. And I think that comes down to how we communicate, how we conduct our listening, how we conduct our fireside chats, that nobody else does it in the way that we do it. So I think that's kind of the spirit of our organization is just different in that way. No, people try to replicate it. I know people who are trying to replicate it, and it's just, I know for a fact it's not going to be Refit. And that's okay. And I wish people luck on it, right? Like we have people doing outreach right now who won a grant. And I sent them our, how we price everything out, how we conduct everything. They won a whole grant, leveraging our process, and they're not doing it the way we do it. And it's not the same. So it's actually becoming more of a partnership now, where they're actually going to be inviting us in to work with them. But it's pretty cool to see how things change. People recognize just the value of what we're bringing. And I think it's just going to continue. So I hope that gives you insight to how we build trust, just through how direct, how blunt, how honest we are with our guys, how dedicated we are to protecting them.
There's another piece to this. We're talking the privacy and the trust and the growth and starting off the fire teams and growing the impact beyond that. We spent, I think, most of the last time we had John, we talked a lot about the civilian and military gap and kind of trying to bridge that gap. What you talk about the trust and the privacy, how do we start to then grow that beyond those small groups into not just the other military folks, law enforcement, those type of things where there is that connection, but just out to Joe Blow on the street who doesn't have any connection to it, doesn't have any military affiliation, doesn't even understand all these type of things. How do you start to bridge that gap? What's your approach there?
So that's then we're getting into the conversation about how are we winning the hearts and minds of American civilians to change the fabric of the United States overall. Mm-hmm. That's what we're talking about right now, right? So let's talk about it. So if there's one thing that I would love to do, it would be to educate the American civilian on just how lucky we are, but not the way that everybody's doing it right now. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like the way people are educating civilians right now is like, you should be grateful for what we did for you. And it's like, fucking relax, bro.
I want to add to that. It's you should be grateful for what we did to you. And it's like, okay, well, what did you do? It's like, no, you don't understand. We can't even explain it to you. You don't understand. You don't get it. And you're never going to bridge a gap like that.
You're never going to bridge a gap. You're never going to have a conversation, not bringing understanding at all, right? So it's actually more of I think a separation of the American civilians overall, those who served and those who didn't. There, for some reason, I think it's actually been throughout history, right? You look back into Greek, I think there was an idiot. The word idiot was actually founded, I think, by Greeks and invented by Greeks. And it was literally idiotes. And it was literally talking about civilians. They called civilians idiotes because they don't understand the world that they're living in, right? They're being completely protected and shielded. And I think that's stupid. If I'm going to be honest, I think it's stupid to do that. I think that I hold veterans on a different pedestal as I think I should, that you were taught how to lead in the worst of situations. So why can't you come back, be humble enough to lead a civilian through the understanding of what the real world is like? I think that could be the thing that changes the fabric of America, right? I think that's the thing that changes the society overall. And if you look back into history, actually, again, you'll notice that generals really ended up winning over their men in combat, and like they fought alongside them. The Roman government and Greek governments and all these governments throughout time were literally overthrown by generals constantly, right? It was just like okay, we're voting this guy in. And then the general's like, I don't fucking like that guy. And he comes rolling in with his men with all their weapons and shit and just take over, right? And then they overthrow the government that way. So the Romans had to figure out a way to appease the generals and give them like great land and everything and take care of all their men and all this stuff, right? So they wouldn't just revolt against the politicians. Mm-hmm. So I think something very similar needs to happen in the American culture where the veteran can come back and the veteran can then educate the civilian, but the civilian needs to be open to learning, right? And I think that there's a lot that can come from. I was talking to one of the guys, his name is Wade. He's a veteran in Project Refit as well. And Wade and I were talking about how important it is that any veteran, I don't care what your rank was, you saw great leadership, you saw shit leadership, come back and learn how to lead a civilian, right? And educate the civilian in what the real world is like the murdering that's happening, the rapes that are happening, the human trafficking that's happening, the drug use that's happening, the literal dredge of society that we don't see. Why don't you educate the American civilian on how real all of that shit actually is, right? And do it in a way that makes sense. And let me actually let you in on how Refit is doing that. So Refit, one of the requirements, or one of the, not requirements, but one of the suggestions for our fire teams is to have a maximum of 2 civilians. So the reason why is because it's twofold. One, you can educate the civilian. The civilian can begin to learn about the veteran, what it's like to be a veteran, about the real world and shit, hear some of these stories in passing. And number two, the civilian might not be as traumatized and might not be as damaged right now as that veteran, and help them affect the change and help them achieve purpose and potentially save the life of that veteran simply through helping that veteran achieve a purpose. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, and it's something I'd actually, or that I do actually talk with all the guys that I coach that are transitioning out. It really is. It's the how do you translate what you've been doing into another culture? And most of the guys that I'm working with were in the special ops community, so they've had experience with it. And it's I tell them it's no different than going to Romania and teaching the Romanian army how to do an L-shaped ambush, right? I mean, you gotta learn, how they think, and adapt to their culture and their language, and do it that way. It's the same thing. And I think it's such a great piece. And one of the things that happens is there's two things. One, the piece of shit in the army is still a piece of shit when he takes the uniform off, right? Doesn't matter.
Right.
Right. So that person walking around saying, well, you owe me, right? It's still the same person, and they're just not wearing the uniform anymore. I can vouch for that in many, many instances. But then the other piece that happens is the whole idea, and I went through this period of life after I took the uniform off. It was the thank you very much, Army, I'm out of here. Don't need that stuff anymore. But the reality of it is the tools, the understanding, especially when we talk about leadership and the processes and systems that we learned in the military, are the best in existence, because they've been tested by putting people in harm's way, by putting people in situations where they will die. There's no better system. There's no better way to test something. So of course it's going to work great in business. You just got to learn to translate it. And I think that's such a key piece of this, and how we bring that back around in the education and the understanding that they're just people, and they have a perception, you have a perception. How do you bring those perceptions together so that now you understand each other, you accept and understand different perceptions? And I think that's a great point to think about and to educate others in that point. And I mean, frankly, you could take any industry. You could take the medical industry, doctors and surgeons, and take them and plop them down with a bunch of firemen. Okay, how are we going to discuss this? Because doctors and surgeons have a process and a way of doing things, and have a lot of information, but so do the firemen. They have a process and way of doing things. How do we bring that together? And I think that's a great point that you're making. What have you seen can you give us an applicable example where you've seen that happen, that come around, that integration, besides yourself, because that's cheating?
That's right. I was test case number one. But the way that we've replicated it, though, is just exposing other civilians. And I think it's really me. I'm not even joking. I think it is me. I think I am the bridge, right? I am quite honestly, the muse, if you will, for bridging the two and helping other veterans even communicate with civilians effectively. And it's because I have the ability to do that. However, we also have brought in with us on a retreat. Actually, our last retreat, we had a civilian that came with us. He was a volunteer for a long time, and we needed somebody else to drive the trailer all the way out to Colorado. So I was like, yo, man, you're young, you're dumb, and you got energy. You want to come with us to Colorado and help us drive this bitch out there? And he was like, absolutely, would love to do that. I was like, great. So he was volunteering for the week and being a driver of, the truck and the trailer all the way out to Colorado. But the other thing that he got to do, and he said it was life-changing for him, he's like, dude, thank you so much for bringing me out. I have just such a different perspective on veterans, on what it is to serve, on what the world is, everything. And just thank you so much. I was like, no problem, brother. Because quite honestly, when you begin to understand how the world works, the workflow of the supply chain, how the supply chain's protected by the Navy, how the supply chain's protected by the Army, how the supply chain and business is literally reliant on the military itself, is absolutely mind-blowing when you begin to blow the picture up big and you look at the world through the lens of the military member, because that is where real life is. Politicians and military run the world. And if you understand that, you begin to understand the moves, the moving pieces, the reasons why people say things, where things are beginning to change and turn and hands are changing, everything. And that is where the enlightenment, I think, happens, where civilians can actually get the enlightenment too. And I witnessed it happen with multiple civilians. That was just one example of one that got some benefit out of it. We actually have another civilian volunteer that's coming out with us. This Colorado retreat at the end of the month of June. They're going to be doing video work for us the whole time. And they are also going to be listening, obviously, and learning. But they're also, when they're going for their master's degree in psychology, so they're also going to be working with veterans in psychology. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be helping this person to learn their market and learn their client even deeper.
I think it's just really interesting because, as much as I think you touched on something really important, James, which is like when you talk about the perspective, and I know this from our previous episodes of the other piece of it there, which is you got to understand that, have those conversations, understand what that big picture is, but then also understand where you fit into that and what your responsibility is. Like, I remember your definition of the American dream. I love it, about the civilians taking on to build that, and our job as, to be entrepreneurs, to help to build the country up like that, because there's all these other people that their job is to protect it and protect us. And I think it's such, I just think the reason that people get so, I don't even know if turned off from it is the right word, but it's like, it's the same kind of thing we talk about. It's like, no, you can't understand it because it's so bad. It's so this, and those can all be true. And I can also have a beautiful house in Tucson with a beautiful family, and I work a job that has nothing to do with that. Like, those things can all be true at once. Like the fact that the military is protecting all of us and protecting the global supply chain, all these different things, those are all true. That doesn't have to change your life. It can change the way you look at things. Correct. But it's just an important piece of understanding to kind of have in your back pocket. I mean, Dad, we talk about it all the time on the show. Of it's like the macro view and the micro view, and how important it is to understand both. If you spend all of your time in the macro view, you will go freaking crazy. You can't live there. It is crazy. I mean, how many people do we know that they live there, and you can just watch their brain like it's like just slowly degrading because they just live in that stressful environment of the global, the global chaos, all these different moving parts of these things. You have to be able to bounce back to the micro. If you just live in the micro, then you're going to be blind to what the macro is. It's like you have to be able to bounce back and forth.
Camden, I would love to say something to that because we do like to talk about business and entrepreneurship on here as well, right? So let's think about the entrepreneur for a second and innovating and coming up with ideas. I think the only place that you can come up with brilliant ideas and change things is when you can live in the macro and the micro at the same time. You must understand the macro to come up with something innovative, to create that opportunity right here, and that's between the two. Mm-hmm. So that's why having an understanding of how the operations work from a high level of the money flow of a nonprofit, 90% and 10%, it comes down to, like I was saying before, the fire teams and how we're funding them and things like that. Yeah. That's an innovation. How we're handling the money is a micro innovation from a macro perspective, right? I mean, I can even think about, immediately I started thinking about impact in my for-profit company, where we actually through a macro perspective have been whittling down to now a huge opportunity inside of the security space itself that nobody has paid attention to, and that's through reporting. So like it's a small innovation that has the potential to be a multi-billion-dollar opportunity, right? And it's because of the understanding of the macro and the micro and being able to find that little sliver in the middle of the two. I really think that's where creativity lives and opportunity breathes.
And before we close it out, let's touch on impact, because that's I want to, because like you said, it does support it's a social enterprise venture.
Yeah.
So tell us what's going on with impact and what's happening next.
So we started out this goes right to the macro micro. It's actually a perfect segue. So, from a macro perspective.
Yeah, you've been doing it for 4 years now.
Yeah, you guys have some experience. So from the macro perspective and even touching on the micro. So the macro is security overall. I looked at the whole market overall, who needs help, right? So communities need help. American fabric needs help in general. Okay, whatever. What does that even mean? Nothing, right? There's so many different ways you can help, and you'll drive yourself nuts thinking about all the problems that we were just saying. So I started to whittle it down. I was like, all right, who is in the community every day that needs help? So I started looking at law enforcement. I noticed law enforcement has problems sharing information and communicating with each other. And I was like, oh, great. And that's another macro problem inside of a macro industry, by the way. And that's where I kind of noticed where I messed up a little bit in terms of launching a new product. You have to be really niche in the beginning, and then you can expand. So what I did is I started working with law enforcement agencies, started working with police, and they started giving me a ton of feedback, right? And I was like, oh my God, what I'm hearing is just to get them to use our product, it's also going to require internal marketing, additional funds from grants. They can't even afford it without additional. There's just no money there unless there is, and there's just no opportunity there unless you push. And it requires, the lift is literally like me trying to lift a 2,000-pound car. And the only way I could do that was with a lot of money and a lot of help, right? So I couldn't do it. And I was like, all right, where else is something that I'm passionate about? I'm going to tell you guys a quick story that leads into the passion. So I was in Las Vegas. It was 2018, I think it was, and I was with Refit. That's funny. I was with Refit. We're in Las Vegas. Dan and I are giving a presentation at UC Berkeley. It was 18 or 19. I forget which one. But we're UC, was UC Berkeley? It doesn't matter. We're at a university out there in California, or for a conference out there. And, UC Riverside. Got it. It was UC Riverside. Anyway, so we're at UC Riverside, and I was going to see my uncle just for the night because, the day shit was over. So I went and saw my uncle who lives in Vegas. And I was like, hey, oh, shit, I'm getting everything mixed up. Let me start over again. I'm sorry. This story's messed up. I was in Las Vegas because of AFWorks. There's actually an Air Force. It's the Air Force venture capital firm, right? The Air Force venture capital, AFWorks. We were invited out there for an event that was happening to talk about our processes because we're talking innovation. So I'm out there doing work or whatever with Dan, and I go see my uncle afterwards in Las Vegas. And I'll never forget this. I'm walking down the strip, and I see this older guy with this younger chick, and he throws his arm around her like he owned her. You know what I mean? And it just was weird. It was not a father-daughter.
In a controlling fashion.
Dude.
That's the way I describe that. The arm around her in a controlling fashion. Body language.
I literally stopped, and I was like, what the fuck? And my uncle was like, oh, it's okay. Let's keep going. I was like, no, that looked fucked up. I said all this shit out loud. And that guy turned around and looked at me, and I fucking looked at him, and I was like, do I do something? Do I attack? What am I? And my uncle's like, James, it's good. Let's go. And I was like, my God, that pissed me off because I still to this day don't know. Right. But I started looking into it more back at that time, just for the hell of it. And oh my God, I'm getting amped up right now. Actually, I can actually feel it in my throat. It really upsets me because I'm like, if that person is being trafficked and that was actually a sex slave, I could have helped her, right? So I'm like, all right, that's in the back of my mind now forever. That's in the back of my mind. And I started learning a lot more from police officers and what they're doing, and some of the problems that they have with sharing information, et cetera. So I'm fast forwarding now, right? And I started asking questions about human trafficking. And I actually ended up working with the Internet Crimes. It's called ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children unit and squad. And I also worked with the El Paso County, Colorado Sheriff's Agency and Department. And, both of those. So New Jersey was the ICAC team, and then the Sheriff's Department out in Colorado was both very influential for me for the past year. I've been working with them for, it was like 6 months. And I ended up stumbling across this idea and opportunity. And we actually went to Rowan University to have them help us out with this, where I was like, hey, so 80% of the time, if not, it's actually, the estimates are now at like 92% of the time, human trafficking touches hotels. And hotels are getting sued for tens of millions of dollars right now, tens of millions, hundreds actually of millions of dollars right now, right? For human trafficking. And they're getting rocked and they're losing. So, and by the way, a lot of these, they're not to blame.
Right.
A lot of them aren't like complicit in it. They just don't know what to do. So they're spending a lot of money on training. And I was like, wait a second. I have a tool that you can communicate in a secure environment. I have a tool also that I just thought up where there's no app required. You just need a QR code to open up a non-app on your web phone, on your iPhone, using the browser. And you can submit directly to the front desk a report of something that's off. Me being a person that witnessed something, which is, by the way, 78% of the time, it's someone else that's reporting a sex trafficking victim or a human trafficking victim in general. 78% of the time, it's someone else that's reporting. I could have reported that, and I could have been a part of the change to help that young girl, right? And now you have an opportunity where even if it's a high-end hotel, if it's a low-end hotel, a middle ground hotel, you can get this really affordable tool implemented that's CJIS compliant, built to CJIS compliance, which is needed for law enforcement agencies to be on it, to then collaborate with local businesses in the area. So we're going to be selling our tool and our platform. It's almost like the fire alarm pool station, but with a QR code inside of every hotel room. That's what I'm trying to get across the United States right now. And there's nothing like it out there. We're in the process of patent. What's it called? Oh my God, patent processing.
Provisional patent.
The provisional patent.
Provisional patent, and then you go in patent pending.
Yes,
once
exactly.
you submit for the patent.
Yes, so we're in that process right now for the entire thing. We just got done working with Rowan University. Sorry, I don't know why my brain broke, but we're very excited about this innovation that is going to lead to more law enforcement agencies getting better data, better communication collaboration with local businesses, and local businesses that will pay for it because they want to avoid getting sued for millions and millions and millions of dollars. And they'll also be able to empower their employees. And in fact, they'll be able to educate their guests. If somebody gets curious and scans it, there's going to be an option for somebody to get educated on it too. Wow. So it's bonkers. So yeah, that's what's going on over there. And we're super excited about that as well.
And that's awesome too. Cause I'm just thinking about all kinds of different situations from sitting in the lobby to the front desk to hallways, elevators,
bathrooms. Well, no, you want to have it in spots. Actually, well, yeah, we'll talk about this offline. But yeah, you're absolutely correct.
But yeah, so that individual, that one, if it's the observer, can do something, right? Yep. It's the old see something, do something, right? I mean, you could actually do something. It's like, that was suspicious. Click. Let me input something suspicious. Or even the victim, in more sense, what you were leading to with the bathroom, when the victim is separated from the predator, having that opportunity to click something and just put a notification in. Because I worked in that space for a few months a number of years ago, and it's an ugly scene, and it's something that's ignored, unfortunately, because I think it is so ugly, and it's I'm not, if I don't look over here, I don't see the problem. There's a lot of that goes on in that space, which is unfortunate.
So unfortunate, and honestly, the thing too that's pretty unfortunate are the myths that exist about it. People think it's like, oh, my kid's going to get stolen in a Target and then like trafficked. That's like 0.005%, not literally. It's a very small percentage of the time that actually happens, right? In other countries, that might be happening, but in the United States, it's actually a lot of the time people getting tricked, coerced, and or their family trafficking them, or like an uncle or a friend or whatever. But it's a lot of the internet stuff too, and people getting like bought through the internet and sold through the internet. It's wild. It's absolutely wild. And this is a way to actively combat against that. We have some other stuff awesome that we're doing too, but
I just wanted to that's it. Just point out on it because it's like, it's such a great solution, and you already touched on why it's such a great solution in so many different ways. There's such a great tool for the solution is probably a better way to put it. But I think one of the interesting things there that I didn't hear you touch on is how it lowers the barrier to entry for somebody helping, because it's like you were telling that story, and it's like, you can take any example. Like I remember on a podcast I was listening to the other day, it was a guy talking about living in New York, and he's like heard what was a domestic dispute down the hallway. And it's like, okay, so what are your options? Like, you call a cop in New York, and he's not going to, they're not going to come. They're so busy with all these other things. You go knock on the door, and you go fight the guy, and then it's like you get your ass kicked, and then it doesn't solve it. And it's like there's so much of that. If it's like, okay, I want to help, but what the hell can I do? And just having something that is like that lower barrier to entry, like I said, that you're able to help with is such an important thing to get more people to step up for it. Because if you just have to go knock out a guy because you think the girl he's with might be trafficking, and it turns out it's his daughter, there's so many question marks when it comes into actually doing something in that situation. And then it turns out, it's like, so having that lower barrier to entry is so smart for those type of things.
And you know what? It's also, you don't need an app. It's actually no app required by anyone on the guest or the victim side, right? The only app that's going to be used is the one by the cops and the one by the employees who need to do it to collaborate with each other. That's it. That's it. Literally it is a brilliant fucking model. And we came up with it working with police. Yeah. And that's what it takes to listen to these. When you sit there, and by the way, when I say brilliant model, I'm actually giving a hat tip to everybody that I worked with when I'm saying that. I want to make that very clear. Because this ended up coming from conversations with detectives and men on the ground, patrolmen, right? And I even had the privilege of speaking with survivors who also told me, like, holy shit, you need to get this everywhere. Yes, this will work. And one of them said, I work with victims now. Every single young victim that I work with has a phone. Every single one. Wow. She's like, I don't know what the numbers are on that, but all I know is from my view, every single one of them has a phone now.
And then just to add, we're talking, the problem solving of being willing to solve the certain chunks of it. Like, you don't know the chunk that you're going to be able to solve with that, but if it takes out, 50%, because 50% have phone or whatever that stat winds up being, then that's a huge chunk, and it frees up other resources to hit that other chunk. And it's like, I think that's also, going back to just, the entrepreneur conversation, trying to solve these problems. It's like, you got to be willing to take those chunks of whatever you can, because those, we talk about, building up, solving all these big problems. It's those 1% solutions, those 10% solutions that usually add up to actually solve something. It's so rare you get something that's 100%
exactly right,
solution.
brother.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Awesome, man. I love what you're doing with Impact, and I'm excited to see how it's going to start to make a change, start to make an impact in that problem, and start to cause these sons of bitches, these terrible, terrible people to
get caught,
get arrested, and get punished, get caught.
Fuck yeah. Pardon my language, but like, I'm never going to forget that feeling helpless in that moment. Well, I didn't feel I shouldn't have listened to my uncle. I look back on that day. I'm like, I shouldn't listen to him, because I'm the guy that stands up in the middle of a bar. If there's a guy yelling in a chick's face or something like that, I'm the dude that stands up. One of my ex-girlfriend's favorite stories about me is when some dude was like yelling at his girlfriend. It was a packed bar. Nobody did anything. I fucking got up and I was like, I just pushed him back just lightly, just gave him a little pushback. I was like, dude, you better back up. Stop doing this here. This is not the place. Like, you want to take your shit elsewhere? You can, absolutely. This is not the place. Then a security guard came over and like backed me up on it or whatever, but I'm not going to back down from, I don't care. Like, that's wrong. You shouldn't be talking to people like that, dude. So if it's another dude, that's a different story. You can go fight that guy. I don't give a shit, right? Like, men can fight. Men to a woman though, come on now. Like, you gotta take that shit elsewhere, or tone yourself down. You know what I mean? So That's it. I'll never forget that feeling of being helpless. And I think it's crazy to look back on your life and to see how different things influenced you throughout your life. And I would consider that a failure that I had that I don't want to repeat, and I feel like I'm making up for.
And look what it's done. It's created the goodness. So
Hopefully,
that's
man,
awesome.
let's get this thing out there.
It is. It's going. So for me in learning, man, I'm going to go back to the trust. And it's such a simple way that you've established to establish the trust with the organization, with each individual as they come in. And then it's just, here's the standards, and then upholding the standards.
Yep.
It is leading by example. It is the fundamental foundation of being a leader. I lead by example. I say, here's the standards, and then I follow the standards I establish. That right there, it's so simple, but it's such a great way to demonstrate trust.
Yep.
Camden, how about you? What'd you learn?
Yeah, for me, it was, James gave me a little bit of pushback, and I love when I get pushback from the guests, because usually we get to a better idea at the end of it, right? Almost always. And it's that saving one mentality versus trying to save them all, save many. And I actually, as I was thinking about this, it's just like we were talking about with the micro and the macro. You have to be present in the micro because, they take my rugby example because it's a little bit easier to talk about than a lot of the other things we were doing. If I have the one kid out there and I can get him inspired to go play rugby and that opens up the door, all that kind of stuff, that's great. But if you're just thinking about the one, it's a limiting belief because then you're not going to think about the 100, the 200, the 1,000. And like that is where you get that really big impact. So it's like you got to have both. You got to have the micro and the macro. So that was it for me today.
That's right. I would actually like to add something too. A really good tip to help you reach the macro is to treat every individual interaction as the micro that it is and do your best in that interaction in that moment.
Love that.
Love
it. James, how about you? What'd you learn?
That's that statement right there. That's what I learned. And honestly, genuinely the understanding of macro and micro, I actually never put two and two together until this conversation for macro, micro, and how important that is to being an entrepreneur. That literally just came from this conversation. And the light bulb went off. I was like, oh my God, that's it. That is it. Like it's the macro and the micro. And you need to, as an entrepreneur, live in the middle and understand both sides to come up with that one sliver, that 1%, as Camden put it, for that 1% innovation to make a big difference.
Awesome. So first off, tell us about the tattoo convention. What are the details, the dates, location, all those things?
So, we're waiting to hear back from Camden County right now, the county itself.
I'll make a phone call.
Not Camden. Yeah. I hope, dude, actually it might work. Like, hey, listen, I heard about this tattoo convention going on. I'm trying to come out to it. My name's Camden. I feel like I own that place. But we're waiting to hear back on the permit because we're trying to host it on Battleship, New Jersey. It will be the first tattoo convention on a military vessel that we know of in the country, dedicated to veterans. So the veterans and first responders can come out, of course. And that's October 28th that we're having that on.
Awesome. Well, how do folks find you? What's the URL or website for Project Refit?
Great. So you can get a hold of us by going to projectrefit.us. That's projectrefit.us. And you can reach out to us directly through there or go to social media and we're at Project Refit on everything.
And if somebody wants to learn more about this counter trafficking, I was going to say app, website, process, QR code, impact that you're developing.
Yep.
How do they get more info on that?
It's actually interesting. Impact is the communication tool. The civilian facing or the front facing or customer facing tool and platform is called Civ Connects. And that's the one that hotels will be purchasing. And then Impact is where they talk because, they're not going to know about it. Only police officers and the employees will know about it. And so you can actually find out more at impactintel with 2 L's.org. That's impactintel.org.
Awesome. Well, hey, James, man, as always, it is great to have you hanging out with us and talking and learning more about
I love it.
all the stuff that you got going on and that impact that you're making. I think next time we'll have to talk about legacy because we've talked about impact. Let's talk about legacy next time. Put that in the
Oh,
footnote of the show
Yep.
because I think
yes,
that's it.
Otis.
So great
Honestly,
to have you on.
it's always a pleasure. And just a little hat tip to legacy. You and I have talked a little bit about it before. My dreams of owning a nice ranch one day. That is still very much my goal. Getting a ranch, a big ranch that I can use and start some businesses off of that is
Yep.
really what I want. So, but we can talk about that on the next one.
There you go. Awesome. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to the Cam and Otis Show. And a special thanks to our guest, James Corbett, for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to pass along to someone else so they can enjoy it too. Make sure to follow the Cam and Otis Show on Facebook and Instagram, and you can watch full videos of the show on our YouTube page. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button too. As always, the full archive of our episodes is available at www.camandotisshow.com. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.